and we can begin.
All right, we are here for a special meeting. Kelly Douglas, please take roll.
Thank you. Chair Sloop.
Here.
Vice Chair Vidal.
Here.
Director Shoemaker.
Here.
Director Wyatt.
Here.
Director Salvaggio.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Ludwig, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. Thank you all for attending this special board meeting. I know we have a regular meeting on Monday, but there is some timing with the action that we'd like you to take today that we just need for a decision today, so we can move forward with some next steps that are coming up tomorrow and next week. So as you know, we've had to make a difficult decision about budget reductions in our school district as well. And in November of 2025, I did inform the board of those recommendations, the community, district staff, and we had a lot of conversations, public conversations around the implications of those recommendations and made some decisions around those. And one of those recommendations involved the unfortunately necessary reduction of then some personnel and staff in the district. And I outlined those again in a memo to you that includes the need to reduce some at high school, middle school, primary school, some classified staff, and also some administrators. So we've been in the process the last number of weeks, especially after we redid boundaries and then looked at transfers, and considered also, of course, staff decisions for next year, whether there were retirements or leaves or resignations. And anytime we can adjust the reduction of staff by then combining or transferring positions to avoid what's called reduction in force or RIF, we, of course, work really hard to do that. It's encouraged both in statute as well as in our collective bargaining agreements, as well as just our practice with our employees. So we took a hard look at all of that through February and March. We even provided some incentive for some early retirement notifications, which helped. But here we are now about to start the month of May, and upon request by our association, they would like to know at this time where we stand with those reductions and to begin to notify staff so that folks can seek employment elsewhere or also know where they are in terms of on a recall list. So we have met with our licensed association leaders throughout this whole process, and again this week. And where we stand right now is that with all of the reductions that we are needing to make, we have accommodated quite a number of those through retirements and resignations and transfers, but we do believe at this time we need to make a reduction in force of 1.5 licensed FTE. Of course, there's a lot of time between now and August, and we can continue to receive retirements or resignations or leaves, and we might be able to recall back those positions before the start of school. But as we stand right now on April 30th, it is where we are. In statute under ORS 324.934, there's outlines a lot of process around reduction in force. Board does not need to provide approval for that, but in our collective bargaining agreement with our licensed association, that is one of the conditions in Article 14. And we came to you last year under the same condition, and actually 2 years ago as well. So this will be familiar for a number of you. And so we are asking for board approval in determining that a reduction in force is necessary for the 26-27 school year, and directing the superintendent to continue to work with the WWEA president to follow the collective bargaining agreement and the Oregon statute procedures accordingly. So you received a memo outlining everything I've just described, as well as a motion. And I will now turn it back to Chair Sloop for process with that information. But I am looking for a motion and an approval for us to continue to move forward.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Just
I think you're on mute.
Director Vidal or Vice Chair Vidal?
Just a moment. I need to get the language. Just a moment, please, and I will have a motion for you all. I move that the board has determined that a reduction in force is necessary for the 2026-2027 school year and direct that the superintendent work closely with the WWEA president to follow the collective bargaining agreement and ORS 342.934 procedures accordingly.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so there was a motion and a second to that the board has determined that a reduction of force is necessary for the 26-27 school year, and we direct the superintendent to work closely with the WWEA president to follow the collective bargaining agreement and ORS 342.934 procedures accordingly. Is there any discussion? Dr. Salvaggio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, is this motion and determination affecting at all classified staff members?
This is licensed staff, and we are working with that process first. And there is no request for that, for this type of board approval in the classified bargaining agreement. It's only in the licensed bargaining agreement.
Thank you. Just for the record, appreciate that.
Yeah, good question.
Any other questions or discussion?
Can I ask a quick question of staff, please?
Go ahead.
So I just want to make sure, I know that the number of 1.5 FTE, that's the number that we're talking about for a reduction in force. But can you just reiterate the number of FTE we're down with the adjustments that you've made with retirements and resignations? And can you just clarify that that is a reduction in staffing, that even though it's not a reduction in force, those are positions that are not going back into our schools because of our budget shortfall?
Thank you. Yes, and that can be easily misunderstood. So we have made a reduction of 6 FTE for high school, approximately 2 FTE for middle school, 6 FTE for primary school. We will be reducing 7 full-time classified staff. We have already reduced the 1 district office administrator. We have reduced the preschool staff with that suspension. The staffing assigned to preschool. Let me just clarify that. So the staffing assigned to preschool. And then with the consolidation of the 2 primary schools, there's also reductions there. With all of those reductions in staffing, we try and take a look at, are there any retirements or leaves or resignations that then we wouldn't replace those, but instead these other folks would flow into those positions. So yes, overall, we will have fewer staff next year based on those reductions, but we've been able to find positions for all of those people based on the number of resignations and leaves and leave of absences and retirements. so that the net then reduction in force is only 1.5 FTE to licensed. Does that help?
It does. Thank you. And I just wanted to make that clear because the effects of our budget shortfall are very real, and I wouldn't want a misinterpretation or misinformation that it was only 1.5 positions, because this, as we all have discussed many times, this is significant. So, so thank you for making that clarification.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments or discussion? So, can you just repeat or clarify the need for this now versus waiting till later in the year? I know last year we did it in March for the reduction in force.
Thank you. That's a great opportunity for us to remind our community and our staff. Last year, when we knew early on as well that we were going to need to make a significant reduction, we did have the request from our licensed association that we make those reductions earlier in the school year so that the impacted staff would have the opportunity to attend what's called a statewide teacher job fair. It typically happens around March, sometimes in April, but it was earlier, it was around March. So we went ahead and accelerated the process earlier, made those reductions. Even though we had a sense that as retirements and resignations would come in, you know, we wouldn't have to make as many, but because it was to honor that request, we announced those earlier. We did end up recalling quite a significant number of those staff back as retirements and resignations played out throughout later in the spring and even into the summer. And so that net result of job loss that resulted in reduction in force was smaller than, you know, what it would have been back in March. This year, our association, which again, we work very collaboratively with, and we're in the conversation continually, asked that we not do that process early in March, but wait at least till after spring break. There was a sense that it wouldn't be quite the number, but also hearing from some staff last year that it was really hard to continue working for such an extended amount of time when they with knowing the news of being reduced in force, and so pushing that back a little. So we waited until after spring break, did some more clarifying. In April, we were starting to receive a few more resignations, so things were kept moving. And then they said, we do want our members to know starting in May. And so tomorrow is May 1st. And so to honor that ask, again, by our licensed association, we can begin that process of notification. Now with board approval, that can happen as early as tomorrow. And that would include the reductions in force, as well as we're going to pair it with transfers of assignments. So most of our staff will know where they're going to be next year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have a question or comment?
Can I make a quick comment?
Mm-hmm. All right. Yes.
So I'm referring to the memo, and I think this is worth saying out loud for anyone who might be listening. The superintendent notified the school board and district and staff community in November that we had a $10 million reduction for the 26-27 school year, and it would be necessary due to, and I just want to read off some of these things. If there's anything that you, Superintendent Ludwig, wish to add, feel free. So at the time, we talked about declining enrollment, inadequate state funding to cover increased costs with payroll, benefits, PERS retirement, unfunded state mandates, contracted services, liability insurance. I think those were the things that were listed. I want to mention to our community that as we have declining enrollment, we actually do have not the need for the same number of teachers, right? Mm-hmm. So at the some point, for us to reach an equilibrium, we will have truly the amount of money that matches the amount of staff. We would hope for that. We would hope that there will be a funding formula that can allow that to be a healthy place. Right now, I'm not convinced there's a healthy funding formula for that. Anything you wish to add, since that was referencing some things we talked about last fall?
No, and I'm glad you reiterated that. There's always the hope that, the funding per student matches what is needed in terms of staffing. And there's what's called a quality education model out there, the QEM, which tries to put what's called the adequacy around funding, a dollar amount to that. And we've heard there's a lot of discussion around Oregon now around the methodology for achieving that number. And so the reality is that there's funding ascribed to what does it take to educate a student today, but then there are also all these other factors that impact and draw that funding away from going directly to students. And those are some of the ones that you described, and particularly as we're seeing these unfunded mandates continue to come through very well-meaning legislation. It means we're drawing dollars into some other aspects of the work of operating school districts that compromises that quality education model number around direct dollars to instruction to students. And it's around this increasing cost of operating as a school district with all these other requirements, whether it's liability insurance or unfunded mandates, or again, just inflation and utilities, the rise of those things that do impact that. So.
Vice Chair Vidal.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Director Shoemaker and Dr. Ludwig for the remarks they both just made. I just wanted to acknowledge the reasons why we're having, unfortunately, to decrease the FTE. Throughout this whole budget process, I have said I really did not want to decrease our number of teachers. And I just want to state during this meeting that I find it very difficult to understand why the Education Stability Fund was not used in this short legislative session, and I find it extremely disappointing. So not only our school districts, but so many every day are in the headlines about having to decrease their number of teachers. So that is my comment.
And I would like to add to Director Shoemaker's remarks, when we look at the FTE of the reduction in staff as part of that $10 million, which then ended up being $9.5 million because we did preserve the Chinese dual language program. So it is a $9.5 million reduction. But in that staffing component, the high school, middle school staff, we were looking at the declining number of enrollment as that parallel. So when you were talking about Director Shoemaker, because we're going down in enrollment, it stands to reason that we should also decrease in staff. And yes, we see a decline in enrollment for high school, which is where we took that 6 FTE. We see a decline in primary school projected, and so far, when we look at some of the numbers now for 26-27, that's bearing out. So that's why we made that reduction there. But that composite of high school and primary school and the preschool staff is only 3.7 million of the 9.5. So the other reductions was also to help us keep operating academic programs, co-curricular programs, CTE programs, class sizes, and experiences that families and children have in our schools in such a way that with all those factors that we were talking about, unfunded mandates, inflation, inadequate funding, we could keep those things operating. So we made some difficult decisions around consolidation of schools, suspending one program. And then, of course, we shifted some eligible funding from general fund to bond. And that helped, but it got us to a place where the staffing reduction is more closely linked to the declining enrollment and not taking a hit because of all of those other factors. Our hope is that year to year, that is where we're able to get to, that declining enrollment and the necessary staffing enrollment are the direct correlation, and that we don't have to do so much other reducing for those other factors. But that time will tell as we get a new biennium budget from the state in 27-29. So.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? And so I just want to make a point, from what I'm understanding, is that the FTE was reduction was also made in mind with our primary consolidation schools, as well as class size, and look at how those class sizes will look for next year. Is that correct?
So I'm going to try and restate your question. Is your question similar to Director Shoemaker's, that the staff reductions were about declining enrollment, but that we also had other reductions that we had to make, and that also resulted in some decline of staff, like the consolidation of schools and the suspension of preschool? Yes. So I think if I heard that question, there was multiple parts of this $9.5 million, and some of it was with the suspension of preschool. Those staff now will have different positions in the school district. With the consolidation of the two schools, those staff are being reassigned. The teaching staff reassigned elsewhere. There are some staff that we can reduce because of the consolidation. For example, we don't need two principals, we only need one to go to Frog Pond. But we had some staffing reassignments anyway, so people are shifting to different positions. So we still made that reduction, but there's transfers and reassignments for a number of those.
Right.
But we do get an overall net savings, of about 1.5 million with that consolidation of that 9.5 total need to reduce.
Okay. All right. And this is just a process that we have to do as we're getting toward the end of the school year, giving announcements to staff.
Yes. Our licensed staff are ready to receive notification of where they're going to be for their assignments next year, and if any of them are going to be reduced in force. And in order to do that, we needed our board to make this motion and approve that it's deemed necessary, that unfortunately we will have some staff that will have a reduction in their job, or a reduction in their employment in the district.
Okay, understand. Is there discussion or questions? All right, Kelly Douglas, do you want to take a vote?
Thank you. Director Shoemaker.
Here, yes.
Thank you. Director Wyatt.
Aye.
Director Salvaggio.
Aye.
Chair Sloop.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vidal.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the motion passes, and I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.